Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to SciFest 2024. It's been a really exciting week. We've still got plenty to go. It's wonderful to see so many people that are joining multiple sessions. We've got our Peninsula International School Australia in Malaysia joining us again. Thank you very much. We've got people in Cairns, Townsville, joining us today. We've got Brookvale in Sydney, Parramatta North, Inverell up in northern New South Wales, and Gwen Neville Public School as well. Great to have you all here. We've got people from Pagewood. We have homeschool groups, we have individuals, and we have schools from all across Australia registered, and very excited to be looking at the perspective of what's happened in the past and what it can tell us about species survival today. So thank you all for joining us. This program is funded by Inspiring Australia New South Wales as part of National Science Week. And it's why we can run all of these fabulous programs this week for free. And it's brought to you by Virtual Excursions Australia. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today. And we have Grant from the Australian Age of Dinosaurs is going to talk to us today from the Dinosaur Lab, the Paleontology Lab. So it is super exciting to be able to have Grant here, to be able to share his expertise. He's just going to turn his camera back on. Excellent. I'm going to spotlight Grant. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and I'll be asking those to Grant as we go through. But if Grant asks you a question, please put that in the chat so we can just keep those a little bit separated. So thank you, everyone, and I will hand it over to Grant.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grant, and I'm coming to you from the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum here in Winton, Queensland. So we're in outback Queensland, at the moment a very dry and relatively warm place. So we're asking that question, what is it that Australia's dinosaurs in particular can teach us about survival of species? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to step backwards in time, 100 million years or thereabouts, to when we find our Winton Formation right here, because most of our dinosaurs, the specimens we find, are somewhere between about 95 to 98 million years old.
Sorry, Grant, we've got people saying that they can't see your camera. I can see it, and I've spotlighted you. Can I just check with some of the other participants? Can you pop in the chat if you can see Grant? We've got yes and no. Okay, so it's a combination. Most people can see and hear you, which is great. I think for some people that aren't seeing him, just check your settings on your end, maybe your view screen, because the majority of people are saying that yes, they can see you. So sorry for the interruption. Keep going, Grant, and I'll try to troubleshoot the no people. Okay, continue. Thank you.
No worries. Hope we get that sorted. So we're stepping back around 95 to 98 million years. And we're going to look at one of our dinosaurs first, a sauropod, like the one on my logo here. And these sauropods, this particular specimen just to my left here that we're going to look at is called Judy. And Judy is a sub-adult, not yet fully grown. We have larger specimens than this one, and we have one that is certainly much smaller than this one. And right here behind me, we can see stretching out here, this is Judy's neck, her neck vertebrae. And of course, in humans or modern mammals, we only have 7 vertebrae in our neck. There's a lot more in this neck. And so we're going to get up close and I'll pick up the camera here, and we're going to have a much closer look at exactly what we've got. I'll turn my view around so that you can see what I can see right here in front of me. So from right here at the end of Judy's neck, we can have a look all the way along each one of these segments between here and here is a vertebrae. And we can certainly count, there's a large number of them. I think if I remember rightly, I've counted about 10 or 11. So the other thing that we're going to get up really close and have a look at is something that we don't have certainly in our necks. See these thin little bones along here? There's a couple of them just stretching along, and this unusual arch on the outside of the neck here as well. These little bones, they've called them neck ribs, and they help to support the neck of this animal because it is a very long and large neck. So let's go back and I'll put you on the stand again. When we think about the size of this organism, this sauropod, size is very important. So one adaptation or thing that this dinosaur was able to do, and this species of titanosaurs, in fact, was able to do to survive for a long time is to be very large. And if you are very large, then it's difficult for other predators to attack you. And perhaps maybe, like some modern animals, maybe some of these sauropods used to group together in herds as well. We really don't know for certain, but being a large animal and some herd characteristics can certainly help you to survive a long time. And something else about those little rib necks that we saw there, something that they do is they help support this neck. So if you're trying to reach up very high to some branches to get some food, if you're spending too much energy using all your muscles to hold your head and your neck up here to be chewing away at the food, using too much energy is a very big disadvantage. So having those neck ribs helping support some of that weight a little bit for you might just help you save some energy. And that is another key factor that can ensure the longevity of your survival, because energy is one very, very key factor in survival of species. Okay, our next organism we're going to have a look at. We don't have the specimen here. The specimen of banjo, one of our carnivorous dinosaurs, a theropod, and that one is in our collection room. I have here a replica of Banjo's claw. So this was on his front arm, and Banjo used to use his claws to essentially rip or hug into his prey, and something like this, certainly very sharp, is going to kill you very, very quickly, in fact. So for this specimen, Banjo is what we'd call an ambush predator. So he would most likely be able to sneak out, accelerate very, very quickly with some very powerful legs and catch a prey, trap it, and he's now got it in his claws and has a nice meal. So not just being very large, because this theropod, relatively small, maybe about my height or so at the hips, and the head obviously a little bit higher. So a relatively small predator here. And of course, what you need as a predator is something to help you catch that prey. And these claws are going to do that job. You need a weapon, something that is going to help you catch your food. Because of course, sauropods that are herbivorous, eating plants, they don't need to think about catching their food. It's literally sitting there waiting for them to browse past on the branches of a tree. But if you've got to go out and catch your prey to eat it, being a meat eater, then most of your prey is moving. You might be able to scavenge a little bit, but most of your prey is going to be alive and you need to catch it. But if you think about that, there is a disadvantage to being an animal that can move very quickly and needs to do so to catch its prey. I want to see if you can think about a disadvantage to being a very, very fast and quick animal that might, such as a scavenger like Banjo. Put that in the comments, and Karen should be able to give me a couple of those suggestions.
Okay.
While we're just, yep.
Using energy.
Yes, absolutely. Because energy is a key factor in survival. If you have to be constantly on the run, moving very, very quickly, again, you're burning a lot of energy and you're only getting a limited amount of energy back from the food that you catch and eat. So if you're burning through or using too much energy, then again, your longevity of your survival is going to be reduced. So there's always a balance between being very, very fast to quickly catch something, but also not being too fast so that you use so much energy that you need to eat too much and everything gets out of balance. You want that nice balance.
We've also had a few people suggesting that if you're going too fast, you might actually miss your prey, that it's hard to stop if you're going very fast and you might get hurt easier.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I like those people there. You're thinking from a bit of a physics perspective, thinking about momentum and inertia, where exactly, if you're going too fast and your prey is able to easily dodge, then you've wasted a whole heap of energy trying to catch this thing. And at the last minute, it's been able to dodge sideways and you spend all that energy and got no food back for it. Definitely another disadvantage.
Rhiannon suggested you might even just run into the trees. If you're going one way and the food dodges the other way, you might run into things.
Yes, and in fact, that does bring us to another strategy for survival. I've got these little footprints here. This footprint is a trace fossil. They call it an ichnofossil, and it's of a coelurosaur, a type of very small theropod. And these ones, in fact, were found near Lark Quarry at the dinosaur stampede, which is about 110 kilometres from Winton here. And so these little three toes indicate that the size of this dinosaur, again, a theropod, a meat eater, was probably about the size of a small to large chook or chicken, or a very small turkey. Okay, so if you think of a chicken, an egg-laying chicken, something of that sort of body size and volume. And these little organisms, or these little critters, they can certainly run, most likely, and dodge and move. Their agility would certainly be higher than Banjo. And so if Banjo was to spend too much time chasing these little coelurosaurs, yeah, they would certainly waste too much of their energy. So being fast, but not too fast, but also being nimble, because if you are somebody else's prey and they're out to eat you, then you do need to be nimble. And if you're a little bit smaller, you can dodge around, hide behind a tree, and that larger predator has to slow down, avoid, go around, and so forth. Then again, you increase your chances of survival. So yes, you have to be fast, but not too fast. You have to be agile as well.
We've got some questions of, does it matter how much protein they get in each meal?
That's a very good question. And look, I really don't know the answer to that. Protein and energy that you're getting from your meal is certainly the key, whether that's coming from protein in the meat for a carnivorous dinosaur, or protein in some seeds, like some conifer seeds that you might be eating as a herbivore. You're certainly getting protein and some carbohydrates. Really, their balance of diet, I'm certainly not a dietitian of dinosaurs. I have no idea, really.
Do they know how fast Banjo could run?
There's various assessments up to perhaps around 20 to 25 kilometres per hour at an absolute top speed. And they're based on comparisons with modern day birds such as an emu, which is one of the closer analogies that we can look at for Banjo. It would appear that perhaps he could only sustain those speeds for relatively short bursts of time, and therefore similar in a way to maybe a cheetah. The animal certainly knows, and Banjo would know in some sense, you get tired very quickly when you run for too long. So you've certainly got to pick your battles about which organism you think, yep, I can catch that one and spend that energy, because eventually, yep, you run out of puff.
Thank you. We'll get to some more questions later, everyone.
All right. So this brings us to a couple of other strategies that we can talk about for our survival of dinosaurs. One of those is camouflage. And as we know from modern animals, if you can be camouflaged, then perhaps you can save energy because you don't have to be running around, hiding, running away from and dodging your larger predators. So if you've got a bit of camouflage, perhaps you can stay very still and avoid detection by that predator. And that means you're not wasting any energy. So that is certainly another very, very good skill to have. Another one, and this one comes from one of our ankylosaurs, Cunbarosaurus ievasi, is to have some body armor. If you've got some body armor on you, kind of like football players do on shoulder pads and body protection, then something trying to attack you or perhaps take a bite, chunk out of your shoulder, might hit that body armor and be deterred. And so again, you increase your chance of survival if you've got some body armor. So some osteoderms on ankylosaurs are certainly, I guess in this case, a kind of passive defense mechanism. So it's allowing you to be protected. You don't have to be terribly fast to get away. And something comes along and tries to take a bite out or stick a claw into you, and it hits this hardened, bony sort of plate, and perhaps it barely leaves a scratch. And so you get to survive and dodge and live another day. Again, something that helps you to survive a little bit longer. All right. You mentioned, somebody mentioned that excellent question earlier about eating, protein. Does this amount of protein that you eat affect you or have, an energy balance? So diet is definitely one of these important factors in surviving, because you need the right diet to get enough energy intake, but as well, what happens, and I want you to think about this and perhaps put some suggestions or answers into the question area there. What happens if your diet, the food types that you eat, are no longer available? What is going to happen in those cases? So say, for example, I like to eat a lot of cornflakes, but what happens if I go to the supermarket one day and there's no cornflakes? What am I going to do? Have a bit of a think about that. Provide a couple of suggestions, please.
Okay, we're waiting for them to come through.
All right.
Here we go. Wheat Bix.
Yep.
You could die. You'd have to choose something else.
Yes,
Adapt
absolutely.
to different nutrients, change your diet, evolve, try something different, adapt or starve, eat meat.
Yes, excellent ideas. So exactly, if you lose one of your food sources, perhaps something in the environment changes and your favorite type of shrub or tree is no longer available. Or for some particular reason, you're a carnivore and in your area, all the little smaller saurosaurs that you like to eat have migrated somewhere else and they're no longer available where you are. What else are you going to eat? And so you have to be able to, make some choices, have some variability in your diet to be able to still find some energy by eating some different plant or some different organism that can still give you enough energy to survive. So yes, diet is certainly a critical factor, and that'll come up again a little bit later on. The other thing, the next thing we're going to try discussing is what happens with, for us as mammals, we know we're warm-blooded. So we can regulate our body temperature. We can sweat to cool down a little bit. And of course, we can find shelter if it's really too hot, sit in the shade, cool down, drink water, all those kinds of things. So being able to regulate body temperature is certainly something very, very important. And for dinosaurs to regulate their body temperature, that's something, I guess, unfortunately, we just don't know very much about, because perhaps some indicators on our sauropods may indicate that they had some similar characteristics to birds. And so perhaps there's some indicators that there's some warm-blooded characteristics, but there's more cold-blooded reptilian characteristics. Really, in many cases, we still don't know. So regulating body temperature, absolutely critical. And certainly to be successful for the dinosaurs to last through that Mesozoic era, all that time, they certainly had to have a way of regulating their body temperature. That's another very key factor. The other one we might think about is when it comes to your breeding cycle. What happens if you have, say, dinosaurs, of course, are laying eggs? And what sort of characteristics are going to give you the ability to ensure the survival of your species in terms of the number of offspring or eggs that you would lay? So I want you to have a think about that. Compare for what we might call a clutch of eggs that, say, a chicken or a chook might be laying. How would that compare with the number of offspring that most mammals have in maybe we call it a litter of kittens or cats or dogs? What about the number of eggs we might assume that a dinosaur perhaps would be laying? And maybe even think about turtles, marine reptiles, those turtles, sea turtles. What can you think about those numbers of their offspring? Put a few suggestions in the comments box, please.
We had some comments before about what's the power of different dinosaurs' jaws, about what they could eat. And, you know, there's other animals that cope with change by hibernating.
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, finding ways to conserve your energy, if perhaps during, I guess, like modern bears, mammals, of course, during a winter, are able to conserve energy and survive some of those cold conditions, literally by hibernating, slowing down their heart rate and breathing rate to conserve energy and survive in a nice, warm, enclosed, maybe a cave or a nice sheltered spot.
So we've got answers of 10, 6, 60, 25, 10 to 15. And Hartford Academy, the eggs mean more offspring. That means more have a better chance of surviving predators. A lot. 20.
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so lots of answers.
Yes. Yep, excellent. Those numbers look really, we don't know. Certainly for Australian dinosaurs, we've not yet found any nests that contain some numbers of eggs that we can go and count and say, okay, this type of Megaraptor had so many, eggs in a nest. We have no information on that from Australia. So unfortunately, we don't have that, but it's certainly something that you need to consider when we're looking for something that helps the survival, because exactly, just like modern turtles, they lay a large number of eggs. You're hoping that many of those might survive, but some get eaten by predators along the way. The next thing we're going to look at is something else to do with your defense mechanisms. If you think about animals that are, so we have those sharp claws, you're able to attack and eat and collect food. But what about if you are not so fast and you don't have body armor and you're relatively small on the small side? What can you do to act as a defense mechanism? And if you think about that from modern animals, you might remember things like making yourself appear much larger. So maybe you can somehow increase your apparent visual size, stand up on your rear legs for a minute, like you may have seen perhaps like monitors or goannas. They'll stand up on their rear legs if they're feeling a little bit threatened, and they'll run at you and literally climb up you. So making yourself appear a little bit larger, a physical appearance of a bigger threat than you are, is certainly another factor that can help with your defense. In other words, maybe it's being a little bit scary. You've just got to be able to scare off a predator. But there's lots of other strategies as well. One more I'm going to discuss right now. If we think about teamwork, something that perhaps maybe is often overlooked in survival. Whereabouts in the animal world have we seen teamwork before that's going to help a group or a family or a large extended family of organisms survive? So I want you to put in a couple of suggestions there. Where can you find some examples? Just name a couple of quick examples where teamwork is going to help you survive.
they're coming through as well, but we've got some answers from before. You could fly if you had wings, tunnel or burrow, herds and groups, laying down and crawling, increased eyesight senses, using colours that make you look poisonous, herds, they're looking at meerkats, wolves, pods of whales, dingoes, flocks of birds.
Yep, absolutely. Excellent. Yep, yeah, that's excellent ideas, because those survival strategies of warning your neighbours, calling out, have some call that indicates a threat is approaching. And like that meerkat example is perfect, because you can warn your neighbours, someone's always on watch, and again, avoid that becoming somebody else's meal. All right, so what we've been talking about so far are characteristics of an organism. What physical characteristics do these organisms have that help them survive? But there's a lot of stuff that is hidden that we can't see. And these things we might call their genotype, the things that make an organism from building it up from its genes or its chromosomes. And those things we certainly can't see physically from the outside. So I'm going to give you a couple of numbers. For example, humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Birds have around about 40 pairs of chromosomes. And of course, we don't have any genetic DNA material from dinosaurs. But if we think about, there was an extinction event, obviously that the dinosaurs did not survive. However, there were organisms that survived, birds being one of those, and really they are modern dinosaurs. So could there be, I want you to think, is there some factor there that maybe could indicate or is worth some further research that might hopefully tell us, is there something about your chromosome number that might enable you to survive through some difficult times or difficult events? Have a little bit of a think about that, and maybe that's worth some research later on. Okay, so we're about to get to a bit more discussion about that extinction event very, very shortly, because as a dinosaur, they survived for around about 180 million years or so before they met their demise. And unfortunately for them, their demise was a meteorite. It came from outer space. Certainly something they have absolutely no control over. And in some sense, they were a little bit really unlucky, I'd have to say. So we're going to have a look at something here that is literally, I'll just bring the camera over, a piece of meteorite from the Elliott's farm that they found here in about 2006. I think they found this piece. This right here is a piece of meteorite, and you can see these little dimples on the surface. Of course, this is not the meteorite that wiped out our dinosaurs, because this one fell in about 2004. But what meteorites do, I'll just put this back there. What meteorites do, of course, is if they're large enough, they release enough energy from the impact with the ground that they throw out all this dust and debris, very, very fine dust from literally the polarizing implosion and explosion of that rock. And it goes back into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight. So this extinction event for dinosaurs really did starve them of their food source. Plants were not able to photosynthesize very well. So of all of the things that we have learnt about so far, I'd like you to see if you can make a quick list of what can make or give you some advantages in that kind of extinction event. So think about energy, your energy use, and being able to find food, conserving energy. We've already mentioned several of these things. If you can make a quick little list, I think you'll find it might give you some indicators about why some of the modern organisms, animals that are alive today, are in fact alive. So I want you to try and think about a few of those things.
We've got burrowing underground, being a carnivore, living underwater, having fur, conservation of food, camouflage, rationing
Yes.
food, armored skin, prey, hibernating, being small and able to adapt to different food, on being
Yes.
omnivorous, small animals, eating insects, being fast, energy efficient, armor. Another, yeah, quite a few people suggesting omnivores, staying in herds, and yeah, a couple of people mentioning that sort of camouflage, or being
Excellent.
poisonous.
Yes. Okay. Excellent suggestions there. Because, yeah, it really is about conserving your energy and, in some sense, becoming an omnivore. Being able to eat something that was not part of your favorite cornflake diet before, you need to be able to eat something else. And, yeah, getting through those tough times, we might think perhaps as many of these conifers might die. And I'll just quickly show you this one here. This is a piece of forest floor. It's certainly not from an extinction event, but this piece of forest floor tells us something about the environment around here in Winton around 98 million years ago. And we find little pieces of pine cone, pieces of bark, small branches, fragments, and so forth. And so we do know a little bit about that environment. And because there are seeds around on the forest floor, then if you're able to eat those seeds, or maybe have a mouth or a beak or a shape that can actually access those seeds to be able to eat them, then you've got a food source. Even after many of those plants have really struggled and died, there's still seeds left around on the ground. So certainly another different food source that you can eat. Okay, so we've talked about, actually, yes, there is one last thing I wanted to show you here. And this is an example. I'll just bring you back over to our magnifying glass here. One of the things that we find on that forest floor and from our digs are little microfossils. And if we just have a look under here, hopefully you can see reasonably in focus there, these tiny little pine cones. So conifer trees or pine trees. And you can see around the circumference or the outside edge of these, there's these little indents or divots. And being a pine cone, each one of them would have most likely had a little seed inside it. And you can see the size compared to my fingers there. These are about 6, 7 millimeters across, very small little pine cones. So all of those food sources were available. And so if you were able to be there eating and collecting some of those food sources, then of course you were going to be more successful and able to survive. So I just want to quickly perhaps remind us of a couple of things. Characteristics, the physical characteristics that we have, such as being a large sauropod, having a weapon, these claws like Banjo, having your camouflage, being fast and nimble but not too fast, conserving your energy, and being able to eat an omnivorous or almost anything that comes your way. Being able to do that is certainly a very, very large advantage. But I do want to point out one other thing, and it's something about, hang on, let's quickly on my list here. Yes, there's something that has, and some things that have out-survived the dinosaurs. So if we think of some non-dinosaurian survivors through billions of years, one of those, of course, is a very simple plant. And it's called a stromatolite, a type of bacteria, really simple single-celled bacteria. And these things have been around for some of the oldest ones found in Australia, around 3.5 billion years over in the Pilbara region of Western Australia. So surviving doesn't mean that you have to be all these things that animals are. There's certainly other ways of surviving, because these very simple bacteria are still with us today. They're still alive. There's stromatolites, these bacteria, found in several places across the planet, which is absolutely remarkable. And so those physical characteristics those hidden ones that we really can't see, the genotype as it's called, are another very interesting factor. And the things that you can't control. Certainly the dinosaurs could never control that meteorite event. And us as humans right now, if there was a similar meteorite, we cannot control that. So there's things that are physical or abiotic, not life-related, that are going to affect the survival of the species, and things that are biotic, like the type of plants that can survive, the type of organisms in your environment. And perhaps just to one last thing there, as humans, of course, we have the ability to influence our environment. And so if we think about modern day species survival, what can any of that dinosaur stuff start to teach us about what's going to happen to species today? Because we are losing species across the earth at pretty much the highest rate ever recorded, apart from some of these very ancient extinction events. And so, yeah, maybe have a bit of a think after this lesson about what humans are doing that is causing some stresses or pressures on the survival of some species, and maybe what we can do to release or alleviate those pressures. I'll hand back to you there, Karen, for some questions.
Excellent. And we've got plenty of questions coming through. So I have been answering some of them as we've been going in the chat and in the text. I'm just going to go all the way back up to the top. So we had Imogen wanted to know what the smallest dinosaur we've found so far is. Maybe just the smallest one in Australia.
Look, the ones I know best are the ones here in Winton. And perhaps the smallest one that I'm aware of, dinosaur, really, is the ankylosaur, the minmi, which is very closely related to our, actually that was just south of Winton, but very closely related to our Cunvarosaurus. So two little ankylosaurs, perhaps the specimens are around the size of this sort of diameter, 1/2 meter diameter, maybe barrel of chest of the organism, so relatively small.
Excellent. Oh, this is a tricky one. So someone's asking about the strongest dinosaur. Now, I would think that would be independent of what. Some dinosaurs might have a strong jaw, some might have powerful forelimbs. But is there kind of like an iconic Australian dinosaur that you'd think is very strong and robust?
Oh, look, in terms of perhaps the jaw capacity, I think we'd have to talk about Banjo, our Australovenator wintonensis, because Banjo is the largest theropod dinosaur that we found in Australia. So, yeah, certainly in that sense, that the jaw bite from that animal, yeah, would be really quite large. But I would still think perhaps that someone like Oliver here, sorry, not Oliver, Judy, lifting up that neck, you've got to have some pretty strong muscles there, and being able to move up to a 20, maybe 25-ton animal around, navigating, you've got to have some very strong muscles. So again, yeah, it's a different measure, but yes, very strong muscles.
Absolutely. This is an interesting question, reflecting on if dinosaurs were around today, and I kind of think the answer is probably yes. If dinosaurs didn't become extinct, do you think we would eat them? I guess we eat birds.
Yes, we certainly eat birds, chooks and turkeys and so forth. Possibly. They might be a little hard to domesticate and keep in a cage, but possibly, maybe we would, yes.
This is linked to the extinction one. So Stephen, actually it's Frida and Annabelle from Ainsley School. We're interested about the food chain. So what dies off first? Is it the bottom of the food chain that's dying off first, or is it the top of the food chain?
It typically would be the bottom of the food chain. So the plants, the producers at the bottom of the food chain, is what everything else above them relies upon. And so if those plants start to come into short supply, the producers at the very bottom of that food chain start to disappear and die out, then everything that relies on those up above certainly starts to collapse. So food chains usually collapse from the bottom up. If you say you take an apex predator at the very top, and perhaps some of those large carnivorous dinosaurs may well have been wiped out. Maybe if there were any dinosaur that was really close to the impact event, of course, they're going to be physically destroyed. But that doesn't necessarily alter, it has nothing to do with what's happening at the bottom of the food chain. So it really is always the bottom that makes the biggest difference.
Excellent. How do we know it was a meteorite that killed off the dinosaurs?
Excellent question. And it really does appear that it's the food chain collapse, and there's a layer of rock found in several places around the world that contains a particular element from the periodic table called iridium. And that iridium, that very, very thin layer, it's like an iridium type of clay, or iridium-rich clay. And that is something that's found all across the planet in these different regions. And below that layer is where we find our dinosaur fossil-bearing layers. Above that iridium layer, there are no dinosaur fossils. And so that layer acts as a very, very distinct boundary. And one place that iridium can come from is asteroids. It turns out that iridium on planet Earth itself is a relatively rare element, but it's very high concentration in this one particular layer. And so that is a whole heap of indicators that really point to this impact event and releasing all this iridium that went high into the upper atmosphere and slowly distributed around and settles back down, producing this layer.
Excellent, thank you. Trying to go back through the list. Is there any evidence that dinosaurs could give birth to live young like some other reptiles?
Look, at the moment, I have no idea of that. The only evidence I've seen, I think, was from South America and China. I've seen some photographs of literally these clutches of eggs, literally what looks like a nest. But I certainly don't know anything about whether or not there were live birth, yes, for dinosaurs. It certainly seems possible.
And I guess we look through the modern birds that have come through, and all birds do continue to lay eggs. So yeah, very interesting. And this is why it's great to continue studying science, because the things that we know today, so last century when I went to school, we didn't have the link between birds and dinosaurs that we have today. So when I went to school, we learned something completely different. Whereas now, with new research, new evidence, the feathers in dinosaurs, the link between dinosaurs and birds has changed. So who knows, in 20, 30, 40 years, what information we'll have then.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And look, one thing for any senior students who are really keen, I think some research around, if we were ever to able to find literally dinosaur DNA, that would probably tell us a lot about whether or not how successful they would have been had there not been that meteorite impact that really did bring about their demise. Because having that genetic ability to have a large variability in your genetic genotype is certainly a factor that allows survival.
Absolutely. We have a question here about dinosaurs' stomachs and being able to the herbivores being able to digest some of these complex plants. What were some of the things that they used to be able to digest their food?
Look, at the moment, we still don't know for certain. I know we're lucky enough here at the museum to have a specimen that we believe does contain, from a sauropod, in fact, Judy's gut content, that we believe is that gut content, and that is literally under study and review right now. So hopefully, if we can get some of that material scanned, like an X-ray CT type scan, we might be able to really see and determine exactly what is in there, because maybe they used to use like some organisms do, a rock, rocks in your stomach that help to grind around and break up some of those seeds to release some of the proteins and energy and carbohydrates inside it. But at the moment, we haven't been able to see that publication. It simply hasn't been finished. That the research is still ongoing. So that will be very special to find out, absolutely.
Fabulous. Now, we still have quite a few questions to go, so I understand if some people need to finish off. Thank you for joining us. Grant, are you happy to stay on for another 5 minutes for some more questions?
Yes, yep, certainly. Yep.
Fabulous. So this is a great one from Anuli in year 2. Did dinosaurs build nests?
Yeah, excellent question. And I would suspect most likely yes. And the reason I say that is because the images that I've seen of the nest from this South American dinosaur, all the eggs were very tightly packed and held together, which certainly indicates that whether it was some sort of burrow in the ground, a little bit of a nice dimple in the ground that helped all the eggs stay in the one region, or some other arrangement of, building up dirt, something around to capture those eggs and make sure they stayed in that same location. Certainly, it really does appear to be a nest.
Excellent. I think we've answered that one. We've got a few different asteroid ones. And certainly there's some of the asteroid questions. We do see asteroid impacts across Australia. And all we need to do is look to the moon to see the vast amount of impact craters that have been happened over history. So it is something that says, relatively common, but the asteroid that hit in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico that killed the dinosaurs was enormous. So it had a huge global impact, whereas most of the time, smaller meteorites will have a localized impact, but this was certainly a very, very big impact. So Hugo would like to know, how big is the largest fossil that you've found?
Me personally,
well, I haven't.
The museum itself,
I guess.
It's certainly one of our sauropods. I think, I forget the exact names of the orders. We've got one we nicknamed Dixie, Trixie, and there's another one I can't remember, but they're certainly two of the very largest specimens that we've found. And that's based on their femur, the largest leg bone down here, just between your knee and your hip. Based on that femur, they are certainly two of the largest organisms we found. And I think they're estimating maybe certainly around to 25 meters long from tail tip to nose tip. Certainly very, very large specimens.
Okay. Oh, this is a tricky one. What was the last dinosaur to go extinct?
Oh, yeah, very good question. The last dinosaur to go extinct. In some sense, we could say a simple answer like whatever bird is the last bird on Earth, but that's a bit of a cheat answer, I think. When you think about the logic of what might have happened, perhaps the largest sauropods that needed the most amount of food to survive every day, they may well have been the ones who ran out of food first. And so in that sense, the sauropods would be perhaps some of those larger animals, the first ones to die out. And then, of course, all the theropods, the meat eaters that can come along and chew on a few dead carcasses, are certainly going to survive longer. So it's most likely that a dinosaur that was medium size, not too large, not too small, but medium size, and was able to eat some meat, and perhaps, look, I really don't know if they would start trying to eat something else. Maybe they'd get so hungry, kind of like rats do, and they'd chew on bark or anything that was available to them. But yes, I reckon a dinosaur that could try chewing on bark or chewing on something else other than once it runs out of meat would probably be the dinosaur that could survive the longest.
Wow. Yes, it's a really challenging question, and this is going to be another challenging question because how many species of dinosaur are there? Now, we don't know because we haven't found them all yet, but at this point, do we have an average of how many species of dinosaur we're so far found in Australia or around the world? I know new ones are being discovered constantly.
Look, I don't know exactly. I'm just trying to remember of Australian dinosaurs. I think we're certainly in the 20s of 20 distinct specimens that would indicate a holotype or a species. So it's not too many, but when we think about what the size of an organism and how many of a type of an organism there are, there's most likely more smaller dinosaurs in an environment, in an ecosystem, than there are larger dinosaurs. And so we keep finding the large sauropods because their bones are so much larger. You know, the femurs, we're talking almost basically as tall as me, about 1.5 to 1.8 meters long. And so they are much easier bones to be well preserved. The fossilization process that causes those bones to turn into rock preserves them very, very well. And that means the smaller organisms, that there must have also been a larger number of very small saurosaurs and little theropods and so forth, even lots of little ornithopods. Because they're such a small size, the number of them that are under or able to go through those specialized preservation processes is not accurately compared or, you know, indicative of how many of that particular type of small dinosaur there would have been. So I think it's a little bit of what you might call a biased finding ratio in terms of the smaller organisms are not so well preserved. But when we look at modern ecosystems, there's literally billions and billions of ants compared to, you know, maybe small numbers of, say, elephants. And so we must have had similar, or most likely, similar ratios of very small organisms back with the dinosaurs, as well as some of those very large sauropods as well.
Excellent. I'm scrolling through. I apologize to everyone who we haven't been able to get to all of your questions. Okay, this is a lovely one that sort of wraps it up. How do you collect the dinosaur fossils?
I guess for us here in Winton, it's relatively straightforward because what actually happens is we find, or the graziers on the properties find pieces of what appear to be rock at first on the surface of the ground on this black soil. And so finding that usually indicates, because of the unique way our black soil slowly turns itself over from the bottom up over thousands and thousands of years, slowly lifts fragments of bones out of the deeper fossil-bearing layer and brings some fragments to the surface. And then we know where to dig. So once we go and dig in those locations, we usually find some specimens buried down in the Winton Formation. And then, of course, it's a matter of bringing those into the lab. So it's not quite like what you might have seen in the movies in Jurassic Park. Of course, you know, it's not just brushing away with a nice brush and this loose dust, you know, blows away. But you certainly need to clean around the outside or the extremities of where we think the ends of the bone or the fossil specimen reaches to. And literally, we treat it like a broken bone. We put plaster around it. And so we make this plaster jacket that literally protects it, so we can carry not just the bone, but all of the soil that it is still buried amongst and rock, bring all of that in this nice plaster jacket back into the laboratory. And there we can work on it from there.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for participating, and thank you, Grant, for sharing those amazing fossils that are found up in Winton, and to give us a real perspective on what we need to think about when we're looking at species survival. So some of it can be something out of our hands, like a catastrophic meteorite impact, but smaller animals that are generalists, which means they can eat lots of different food and they're flexible to change, have a far better chance of surviving than a large, big animal that only eats one thing. And we see that over time. And some research you can look at doing is not only the dinosaurs, but looking at the Australian megafauna as well, and how some of those species disappeared because they were big and they only ate certain food. So it certainly is an impact that can happen. Okay, I put lots of responses in the Q&A as well. If we haven't got to your questions and you still really want us to answer them, when I send the follow-up email with your copy of the recording, please feel free to pop those questions in an email to us, and Grant and I will go through and answer them. I will also be putting some great links from the Australian Age of Dinosaurs. So you'll be able to research not only the dinosaurs that have been found, you can actually look up by your state and find out some of the dinosaurs that have been found in your local area. So it's a really great resource that you can continue learning about dinosaurs and what their extinction can tell us about our species survival today. So thank you once again for joining us for SciFest 2024, and a big thank you from Grant from the Australian Age of Dinosaurs for sharing those amazing information with us. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.